Khadra Ali Heather. My mother's face humbles me. It's also my reset button. Her story and her face reminds me how small I am in times of trouble. As a result, I still run to my mother at almost 30 years old, and I still manage to surprise her with my foolishness as she looks at me and says, "Really?" There's a story in every face that is often lost and forgotten in technology. I will attempt to remind you of the value of a person's face by sharing with you and call you to practice more interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication validates our interpretation of the world. The greatest Roman orator, Marcus Tullius Cicero, says, "The face is a picture of the mind with the eyes as its interpreter." The focus for the next 10 to 15 minutes is to energize, revamp, and reset your perception on interpersonal communication. I will try to do this by reminding you of the oldest and purest form of communication. Now, the tragedy of our times is that we are given a false sense of human interaction. We all have Facebook. Maybe we use FaceTime, WeChat, or Snapchat. In the advancements of the technology and the times that we're currently in, we're losing the good old tea and conversation, or as I would say it in my Somali language, sheh and shekel. The social conformity is depriving us of human relationships. The simple concept of unfolding and constructing and building human relationships on a pure form. Nonverbal communication accounts for 90% of our communication, but yet we spend so much time building and using verbal communication. We judge others non-verbally. We look at the way they're dressed, the religion that they practice, the color of their skin. We don't give them a chance to explain or introduce themselves. We use second and third person narratives when we are inquiring about our neighbors, both literally and figuratively. So the goal for interpersonal communication is to get you to ask, listen, share, and respond. I will explain two ideas that currently deter our face-to-face communications. The very first one is technology. A 2014 study showed, looking at 100 friendly individuals participating in a 10-minute conversation, when their phone was present, they were distracted, they continued to fiddle with their phone, but in the absence of technology, their phone, the conversation resulted in greater empathy. That should be a public announcement. Conversation resulted in greater empathy. We need empathy so that we are able to reach out and see human. Another study showed when we share a smile or laugh with someone face to face, we are more compassionate, we are more empathetic, and we also improve our health. Our gestures start to mirror one another, and we are able to adopt a new concept of who we all are. So the question becomes, well, what's in it for me? Like, why is this important to you? Well, I'm a Muslim Somali refugee, migrated to the United States November 1993. In the process of climbing Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's that level 3 called love and belonging. And in order for people like me and my mother to climb our hierarchy of needs in pursuit of happiness, we need empathy, compassion, and understanding. Now, that's impossible to adopt that without empathy, and empathy is the product, the result of face-to-face interaction. So in order to achieve, to feel love and belonging, it is important that we start to talk to one another, not at one another. This brings me to the next concept. The second deterrent to face-to-face communication is the makeup industry. In 2016, the makeup industry reached $17 billion in sales. It grew 6%. Now, majority of the products were highlighting, contours, as well as other makeup primers. We've become a masked society, masked in emotions. We are afraid to sit in front of one another. If you've ever said, "Oh, I don't feel like getting ready," you and I have something in common. However, also, the makeup industry has become so normalized. They've given us this idea, this concept of what beauty looks like, what it means to be fit for face-to-face communication. And it's no longer, the cover girls are no longer paid celebrities. In an article that was recently published, Digital Surgeons showed that makeup tutorials on YouTube and Instagram, makeup tutorials account for 700 million views per month. People are learning how to look beautiful rather than being beautiful. So gone are the days of Kodak moments. I grew up in the 90s, so I have an idea of what that was all about, the Kodak moments. Now, the purpose behind understanding that technology and makeup impact the way we interact with one another, or the lack of interacting with one another, reminds me of my mother. My mother, when I was young, I vividly remember her saying, "Labiwaji wa haram," which means to be two-faced is sinful. I took that literally. By taking it literally and talking to more people, communicating with others face-to-face, I've discovered a new superpower. A superpower that allows me to change minds and hearts. As a result, and that superpower is in all of us. The human face allows us to navigate and manipulate how we are perceived. We live in a society of implications. Everything is implied, nothing is expressed. When it comes to my identity and who I am, I don't want you to infer, I want you to ask. The desire for face-to-face interaction is built in every human being. And with that, I'll talk about the vagus nerve. Now, I'm not a scientist or a psychologist, I'm just a language arts teacher. But the vagus nerve connects the mind to the heart, and it wanders throughout the body. It's also called the love nerve. The more you stimulate your love nerve, the more compassionate you are, the more understanding you are, the more love you are given. But the vagus nerve is important because it projects our humanity to our face. And it also projects in our voice. It is good to stimulate your vagus nerve because when you do, you are decreasing your chances of cardiovascular disease. You have a healthier immune system. You are reducing your level of stress. So not only is sheh and shekel, conversation in tea, valuable to you and your health, but it is also important to your community. Dr. Dasha Keltner from UC Berkeley said, "Communities that have the most sympathetic members will flourish and raise the greatest number of offspring." But how do we stay true to that, right? We've become fictitious, we've become animated, everything is superficial. We invest so much in emojis. Supposedly, these yellow caricatures are supposed to imply my human emotions. Now, the smiley face with the heart-shaped eyes does no justice to my face. Just doesn't. So it's very important when we are using emojis to connote or imply human emotions that we remember our face is much more valuable. Also, using emojis and technology, we've become so desensitized. There is no digital technology creative enough to capture the subtle, unspoken words of the human face. The contextual background that I get from looking at my mother in the face when I'm talking to her or talking to my friends in person, the contextual background gives me an appreciation and allows me to build on my relationship with others. But it also allows me to understand their human emotions. Technology is unequipped and unqualified to tell the narratives hidden in faces. And what we do is we hide behind a screen. And hiding behind a screen somehow gives us a permission to be callous or to avoid. I wrote an article last November for Washington Post on explaining my faith. And I made the mistake of reading the comments. We live in a world where we're supposed to just get over it because it's just words. But in the absence of a person's face or a human interaction, words can kill. It can harm a society, it can create disconnect, but it can also create pain for the individual. But also, according to Vinita Mahatab, she's a licensed clinical psychologist, she says that there are 3 telltale signs that we wear on our face. We wear aggression, sexual orientation, and personality. As a result, personality is very important. As a young Somali Muslim refugee, my personality is worth getting to know. Much rather I offer you my time and you get to know me than risking the fact that you may learn it elsewhere. But also the tragedy becomes the tragedy of not participating in face-to-face conversation is that we get a single story. And we all know that the dangers of a single story is often more popular than the actual. So what now, right? I'm standing here talking to all of you, and you're listening to me. You're actually better than my high school students. Thank you very much. I am calling you to reset your perspective on interpersonal communication. Reevaluate your belief system. Listen and validate. When I was young, my mother personified everything. She personified the chair had feelings, the table had feelings, the door had feelings, my sisters had feelings, everything had feelings. But in her personification, I learned that there's more to life, that not only people, but also our environment is very valuable. Wouldn't it be nice if we were governed by our mother's spirit? Would we not see every child as our own? And just as we embarrass humanity, would we not get the look that would slap the foolishness right out of us? Every so often, I'll visit my mother to indulge in a story, her story. My mother once shared a story with me of how she had to cross the Juba River to escape the civil war in Somalia. She crossed the Juba River with my brothers anxiously crying on her back, while she led a group of families to survival. She'll watch the news and she'll say, I wish the president would come over for dinner. I'd like to give him sheh and sheko. And I'm a little biased, but my mother's sheh and sheko is better than golfing. May we all remember our mother in everyday conversation. But lastly, it has been proven that when we communicate face-to-face, we build a language of community, compassion, unity, understanding, and trust. And if you take anything away from this talk, I would like you to remember, people like my mother and I, we don't want to eat the whole pie. We want to bring shah, tea, in hopes that we can engage in a sheko conversation and somewhere down the road get a taste of the pie. Thank you.